And hello, everyone. Welcome to the ComicBase Livestream. I'm your host, Pete Bickford. I am the creator of ComicBase, and I get my hands on a number of other things around here. But anyway, welcome, and we're happy to have you here. Please, if you would, take a moment and like and subscribe, to the video if you haven't done so already. We're apparently just a couple short of the magic 300 subscriber account. At which point, apparently, cool things happen in YouTube. Among other things, they also allow you to auto-copy your streams over to Odyssey, which would be really nice just in case YouTube becomes really unreliable. More on YouTube later. Make a note to myself to talk about some of that. Anyway, yeah, it's been a really interesting weekend for us here at ComicBase. You guys probably, if you try to hit the servers this weekend, you probably know. But we'll talk a little bit about that. Also want to, very importantly, I want to get to your questions in the chat. So please, if you would, post them in the chat and prefix them with the @ sign and then ComicBase TV. And that way they'll show up and they're easier for me to scan as things are whipping by at 1,000,000 miles an hour over here. Anyway, I want to say welcome to everyone. By the way, how are the mic levels? And let me know in the chat, please, if the stream starts getting weird on me. We're pounding servers pretty good right now in terms of bandwidth. We're uploading lots and lots of stuff right now, so if the things get dicey, I can slow some things down. But it looked before the show like it was going to be okay, but I can dial some things down if need be. So please flag me down if so. Anyway, hey Jeff, come to us from Phoenix. And as I put earlier on, jealous. You guys do not do this nonsense with daylight savings time, and I honestly, I would almost support the craziest administration we have if they would just get rid of that damn thing. It's just such an interruption to all of our lives, and it doesn't make any sense on any level. But anyway, yeah, no, that's I'm glad there's actually one state in the union that does not go in for it. So yeah, congratulations. I'll bet you slept normally this weekend. So good for you, Greg. Nice to see everyone, and welcome. Yes, the 69th meeting of the I Have Enough Comics to Know I Have a Problem Society. Yes, it's like an issue of sex criminals or something. Yeah, I went out of my way to not do anything weird with a number. It took some doing. Jet City Comics, hi from Orting. Where is Orting? Let us know. Mike, Oro, nice to see everyone. Fred, good, glad you could join us. Steve, nice to see everyone. And yeah, let's get on to the adventure. So I didn't really say anything about it on the last live stream, but after months of waiting, some furniture was actually finally going to arrive down in Florida. We've got a little house down there, and we were finally going to have a bed frame. So if I went down there to do work or whatever else, I could actually not wake up on the floor, which is, I don't know. Once you get out of college, waking up on a mattress on the floor gets really, really surreal. So I was really excited that after months of waiting, the bed frame was finally going to be in, and I was going to be driving down after work on Friday. Friday morning. I was going to drive down to Florida, take delivery of things early on Saturday, and just do a couple things around the place. Fix up a couple things and head back. That was going to be my weekend. So I'm prepping to go on Friday morning, and it's like, wait a minute, the servers have powered down. What the hell is that all about? So I power them back up, right? And I'm looking at the server logs and everything. I'm trying to see, like, well, what could have caused this? Is like we have some kind of weird power transient? Is there something wrong with the UPS? Did the dog bump into something? What could possibly have happened? Server logs, made a little bit of a reference to an old disk drive that used to be in the system. There was the Intel Optane thing was still throwing a hissy fit about a RAID array we'd taken out of commission on that drive that we didn't use anymore. I thought, well, okay, we'll disconnect that one, make it the Optane thing happier. Seems like things are running great. Don't see any further problems. It's running great while the hour I'm there. And it's like, okay, fine. Get in the car, go to Florida. Everything's good. Get a call about 6 hours later. I'm almost to Florida, and get a call from the office back here, and it says, yeah, the servers are out. I'm like, what? And you're kidding. I mean, they were out this morning, but they're up now. So no, they're out now. It's like, okay, so you start talking through. It's like, okay, well, here's how you restart it. And again, restart it, no problem. But now I'm getting really worried. But I feel, okay, the second, we check a few things, but the second we get into, Florida, we'll be firing up, the computers down there and remoting in, seeing what is causing this problem. Because now I am several hundred miles away, and I have got to be there for the next, like, 13, 14 hours, for this delivery that I've been waiting on for months. But things are starting to go a little weird. I mean, because servers just don't. I mean, they just don't go down. Unless you're planning to do a system update or something like that. It's like, no, these things are down for minutes if they're down for anything. And now they've been down twice in one day unexpectedly. So we're chatting with the team back there. We've got a remote into the whole thing. And again, you check a few things in the system event logs. It's this seems a little hinky, but I don't really see anything that would cause the server to go down. And then as we're talking, about 8:30 that night, server went down, restarted, and it didn't come back up. This began a weekend of hell for me. So yeah, it's basically from that night until about 1:30 in the morning. I'm on the phone with the folks back, my wife and the folks back here in Franklin. We're holding phones up to to BIOS screens and trying to check any number of things. We're swapping cables and UPS supplies and any number of things that what could ever cause this thing to happen. And everything is just getting worse and worse. It's getting to the point where, like, you get power to it, and then fans will cycle down without. Maybe it's a thermals issue, and we're getting auxiliary, air support into the whole thing, just in case something's going weird there. We're thinking, wait, the mail server went down at the same time. We're thinking maybe the UPS that's backing both of them, uninterruptible power supply. We're thinking maybe there's a problem with that, so we get that out of the mix. We're doing all this stuff, and eventually, if you guys have ever been in a situation like this, you take the gentler steps to restore before you take the more dramatic steps. So we eventually got to a point where, like, okay, can we boot into safe mode? Can we boot in and check drivers? Can we do all these things? And as we're going, all these things are getting more and more bad. I mean, it's getting to the point where, like, safe mode isn't happening, and whatever else. And we're like, geez Louise, I mean, what are we going to do? So eventually we try a system restore. System Restore is Microsoft's kind of built-in thing. It says, hey, we'll just roll your Microsoft Windows back to the place it was before you installed the latest update or things like that. And there had been an update to the Microsoft system just the night before. There was a quality release, and I thought, well, geez, maybe this is like a bad Microsoft update patch. What could possibly be going on? So we restored back to that one. And then suddenly everything just went completely to hell. It suddenly booted up. You could see it was up because you could see the backlight on the monitor come up. You could watch, for the inside of the case, all the different diagnostic lights cycle up. You could see the processor fan going and all this other stuff. But it would just sit there on a black screen, and there's no interface whatsoever. There's nothing going on at all, and it sat there forever. And restarting multiple times got us nowhere. It just sat and sat and sat and sat. And it was at that point 1:30 in the morning. I'd been up early. I'd been driving a million miles. Everyone back here was all shagged out. I mean, we're just completely at wit's end. So we decided to pack it in for the night. Woke up, caught an hour or two of sleep, as I'm researching different things that could possibly be going on. And in the meantime, I'm counting off, the hours I have to stay down in Florida to take delivery of the furniture that we've been waiting on for months before I can haul ass and get back, to home base and diagnose things in person. I read about a fascinating story I learned. Turns out Microsoft System Restore has an issue. I don't know how many of you knew about this. I certainly did not know about this until last night, or last weekend. Turns out if you ever use Microsoft Restore, System Restore, and you restore past the point where they'd put down a quality update for Windows 10, turns out that it will go into a hard fault boot loop where it will hard stop and then restart and never stop doing this because it figures out that the drivers it's using are not in the right configuration, they're not signed in the way that the new version is expecting, because they were before the system restore. So it's like, and the technical note you're reading as you're doing this, it says this is a known issue, and I'm thinking, wow, Microsoft, that's one mother of a known issue. But they're like, yeah, no worries. There's this elaborate set of instructions you can follow, which involve forcing it to crash restart multiple times till it eventually gets you into a mode where it says, wow, you don't seem to be able to start it all. So would you like to get into a diagnostic mode where you can tell it to boot without checking the signing of the drivers? And so I'm like, okay, all right, I guess that's what we're doing. And at this point, I'm so tired, you can feel your teeth in your mouth. I mean, this is how sleep deprived I'm getting at this point. But we do this one, and nothing gets better. And it's just, we try a few more things, and then eventually, like, okay, look, there's nothing for it. I've got to wait around, and half an hour later, the furniture guys showed up there. As they're loading in, I'm loading out, I'm hauling ass, and I set the land speed record going back from Florida to Tennessee to try to get back and try to diagnose things in person. In the meantime, I mean, it occurred to us that our boot drive was in what's called a RAID 1 configuration. It's mirrored. Maybe it just needs time to boot, because we could see that. It's like maybe it's just working on something, and maybe when it gets done with that, maybe it'll be better. But the other thing we thought is that, if it's a power-related issue, if it's something to do with the power supply, the mere fact that you leave it on, drawing power during that time, if it doesn't hard boot down, then that would also tell you something about whether the power is stable. Because at this point, we don't even know if this is hardware or software. This is the craziest thing we've ever seen. So we get back, I get back in town, get the mail server back up. That one had just, I guess, been knocked around. I get back in town, get the mail server back up. That one had just, I guess, been knocked around just by all the shoving around of cables and things like that. And I, get that one back up, so now I can receive the thousands and thousands of emails from people saying, where the hell's your system? And I get to work on restoring things like that. To make a long story somewhat shorter, we waited for several hours for a RAID reboot on the first drive. We wound up pulling a system restore after that, and I eventually got to a screen where, oh, thank the Lord, I could actually see a actual Windows desktop again, and then it kept on hard shutting down the power again. And it seemed to be driven by particular actions we were taking in software. In other words, we could start up, certain websites, like we'd start up the ComicBase.com website, but as soon as we did anything involving Atomic Avenue, boom, server would hard fault down, and then we went to a state where, like, okay, we'll just put the Atomic Avenue site into a position where the where that's essentially in its offline mode. It's like we're working on new system release mode, so there's limited access to it, and that seemed to work for a little while, and then that started failing, and then the whole thing started failing again, and suddenly you couldn't even boot into safe mode. And at this point I'm thinking, well, geez, this has got to be hardware at this point. There's nothing that explains any of this. And so I'm now middle of the day on a Sunday in Franklin, Tennessee, and I'm thinking, God, I miss the Bay Area, because back then there used to be a place called Fry's Electronics, which unfortunately is no more, where you could go and get random computer parts on short notice and swap them in. And I'm thinking right now, what I really want is a power supply that's not the one that's in this computer. Anyway, half an hour later, there's at least one person who works here who does not have a working computer anymore, or at least did not. Basically, we Frankensteined out the power supply out of their computer, stuck it in the new one, cut myself on the sheet metal. Anyway, and when it's all said and done, powered the whole thing up, everything came up beautifully, and it's like, oh God, this is horrible. I cannot believe this weekend. And I went off, and just after making sure it worked for an hour or so, then I just went out and had a beer or several. So anyway, I hope your weekend was better, because that's what I did. Let me just check the chat here, because I've been yapping for a long time. Let's see here. All right, so Mixer first came on Starling's. So we're just talking about other things. Yes, the espresso machine can only do so much. Yes, Kathy, nice to join us. So yeah, so I want to talk a little bit about what did we learn from this debacle? And there are a couple of things. One is, we've been doing this ComicBase thing for a long time. We've been doing it in the internet era for almost as long at this point. It's you know, when we start out and you're just doing software and you release it once in a while, it doesn't matter whether your business is up and running 24/7. As soon as you have a server that anyone needs to contact, every second you're down is a problem for somebody. So we have not had a sustained system down, other than the one that happened with the corrupted hard disk about a month ago, for about 13 years. We had a planned switchover when we moved over from the Amazon servers to our own. But before then we ran any number of racks of servers, and everything was always, if we were down, it was a planned down, it was down for a couple of hours, was generally the rule of the road. And then everything seemed like it just went to hell. One thing we learned after the last time we had problems was it's not going to be good enough for us to have just one set of servers on things. So if you've got a web server, a database server, an email server, whatever else, it's, we're now at a place, and it's gotten only worse with the supply chain problems we've got going on right now, where, when, they say they say this with crime, it's like when seconds count, the police are only minutes away. But when you're running a server, when seconds counts, Best Buy or Fry's Electronics or anything like that is only hours or days away. As soon as we, even Friday night, heading down, as soon as we thought, well, something's a little weird on the whole thing, we'd already put in orders for certain replacement parts, just in case they would wind up being useful. But, over Amazon, using the fastest possible shipping, those weren't going to arrive till Monday. One piece got in Sunday night. But just the second anything got a little bit hinky, we were like, if we're caught out here, let's make sure we have parts on hand. In the end, we wound up having to essentially disable another person's computer in order to steal an appropriate power supply, because despite the millions of cables, millions of hard drives, memory sticks, replacement copies of this, that, and the other thing, one thing we did not have sitting around the office was spare power supplies that we could pop into computers that were failing. And that's something I think we're really taking to heart, is that we're not a large company, but at the same time we need to be like a large company where, if your laptop goes out and you work for like Boeing, the IT guy's going to wheel up a cart and he'll be like, okay, employee number 6J743, yes, sign here. Here's a laptop that's exactly like your old laptop, and just log in and it'll configure itself and you'll be done. And then he takes it, your dead laptop, sticks it on the pile of dead ones, throws it in a pile in the back room. They lather, rinse, repeat. They buy laptops by the thousands. We don't buy laptops by the thousands, nor do we buy servers by the thousands. We buy them by the zins. But I think we've got to very much move much more towards standardized hardware and standardized software. One thing we don't have the ability to do easily, and we could have done this, is we could spin up Amazon cloud instances and shunted load over to other things like that. But one of the differences between us and a very large company is, when you've got a ginormous server farm serving your website, and something in cluster 73 fails over, you just shunt the load and you spin up cluster 74, and it just goes over and you barely knew anything happened. And you can troubleshoot cluster 73 at your leisure. Now, this is true for most types of servers. I mean, like from your main web servers and things like that. If something goes wrong at the heart of your database server, then even big companies will go down. Or at the very least, they'll suffer much more elaborate troubleshooting. But when you need to be able to spin up, replacement gear, it's not acceptable to be down for hours, let alone days. And so we are definitely, as we're shifting it, we're looking at our buying for the next year, because we were already in the middle of specking out our server upgrades for the coming year, and we'd already figured out that we need to get 2 of everything. Whenever you buy one thing for something, you're going to buy more than one thing, and we're basically thinking we're just going to have a hot swap. A hot swappable copy of any of our mainline production servers, basically powered down, ready to go, and just the second anything like this happens in the future, because things happen. Basically, have the other one ready to go. If your local fire station, if you look at it, they don't just have the one fire engine typically, unless you're really way out in the boonies. They've got a spare engine, which is, we used to belong to, the fire, squad from 10, station, from 15, years back or something like that, and it looks really old and it really jank like that. But I can, assure you, they also test that one to make sure that it's working and in functional order. It might not do all the tricks the new one does, but in a pinch, they're going to be able to get some kind of water on a fire almost as quickly once they figure out that something went wrong with the main engine. And in the meantime, they'll have also called in support from surrounding fire companies and so forth. But yeah, we need to be able to do the same kind of thing with some of these other things where if a main web server of ours fails in the future, we need to be able to just power up another one and just have done with it. Another thing we need figured out we need to do is we need to just basically have components that are absolutely mission critical, like fans and power supplies and so forth, sitting there, not in somebody's computer, sitting there in the shrink wrap, ready to go, be just like the loaded on the IT guy's cart. But we need to be able to just pull one down off the shelf. It's the same power supply that goes in everybody else's machine. Pop it in, power it up, and just have done with it. And literally just keep those as spares in-house. It's not good enough to say, oh yeah, send someone down to Best Buy or send someone down to Fry's and get a replacement power supply. So that's those are some of the things we've learned the hard way. And yes, this is pricey. So I looked at the bill we were going to be paying for provisioning our new servers. And then, you looked at what the bill would be with all the extras and all the doubles, and you're like, yeah, this is going to be a good time. But yeah, that's something that, we've got to do. Another thing, we've talked about before on the show, and, I think this applies to not just, running an IT shop, but also running your own computers. Backups, man, you got to have them, and every time you want one, you will wish you had one more than you had. Because you're always getting to the whole thing where like, yeah, but what if my backup fails, or what if this fails? I mean, you're going to drive yourself around the bend if you don't have very current backups, and if you don't have them stored someplace that isn't your computer. So think about all things that can happen to your computer, and we've taken tech support calls on any number of them. We've had computers that were washed away in Hurricane Katrina. We had computers where the ex-wife stole them because they were mad. Someone had mad with all the money the husband spent on the comic collection. We've had fires. We've had floods. We've had you name it. Any way there is to destroy a computer, someone's had their ComicBase collection on something like that. Which is why, not just assuring that your hard drive is working, but make sure your collection is stored someplace which isn't your machine. A really good way to do that is make sure that Sidekick has backed it up to the cloud. So that way, no matter what happens to your computer, some kid rips it off while you're, go to the bathroom in a coffee shop, whatever the thing is, you've got a copy you can download. You buy, go to Best Buy, buy another computer, and then you can download your collection again. But yeah, no matter where you are, it's like they say, if you don't have your data in more than one place, you don't have your data, and that is very, very true. So we've never been in a real trouble as far as not having backups here. I mean, we've probably babied it along way too much, not wanting to do dramatic things in terms of restoring hardware. I mean, because you never, when you're restoring a failing system, you're always worried about taking that step that you can't just undo if something goes wrong. So when it comes down to I don't know, this Windows is just not booting, we're gonna have to just restore the C drive. And we're like, that's dicey, and so you're like, well, what if the restore is a little funny? And at that point, it's like, God, I sure hope I don't have to rebuild Windows from ground up and then start restoring files one by one. I mean, and reconfiguring things. That's the nightmare. As I'm hauling my butt back from Florida, I'm thinking like, all right, what are these 7 different ways that all our efforts could fail? And if they failed, could we deal with the next step down? And yeah, that was a little tension there. So anyway, yeah, that's I guess what I wanted to say about that kind of situation. Tense weekend. Hope never to have one like that again. It's been about 13 years since the last time we were down for multiple days. That was once again when I was in Florida on a family vacation in 2008, and we had one of our rack servers fail back at ComicBase, and I was sitting there all through the night chatting with one of our employees who's trying desperately to diagnose things again, and I'm contemplating aborting our family road trip, vacation in 2008 and flying back home. Luckily, we got it eventually working again, but yeah, we were down for over a day there, and that was 13 years ago. And those are the days you were absolutely horrified if you work in IT, because all you can do is picture all the frustrated customers and all the people who are just, I mean, if you can't get it working during a work week, then none of your employees can do work. You have to send them home, and it's just, everything just grinds to a halt. And that's even when your data is backed up and you're never going to lose anything. Just the system downtime is just so horrible. You really got to manage to that. We also have, have had some internal ideas. They're a little bit esoteric about, the way we're going to partition different things and not deal with things, and the RAID schemes we'll be using in the future, so that we, if things, individual disk drives fail, we can get back on our feet much faster. So, I mean, we're definitely doing an after-action review on this whole thing to kind of like make sure that, okay, bad things are going to happen to all of us, and when they happen next time, they're not as bad. But yeah, no, like I say. Yeah, hell of a weekend. I hope yours was better. Anyway, let's go to the chat and see how we're doing on stuff. So this is, yeah, wow, weekend. Hell yeah. Yeah, and I'm going to get to the diamond thing as well. Mike says, heck, I remember when Fry's was Incredible Universe. I do not. I was in Fry's for 26 years. And I didn't remember that. I always thought Fry's came out of the Fry's grocery store, but maybe they were unrelated. But Fry's Electronics, for any of you who haven't been to either a large city in the Southwest or in California, it was an absolute geek Disneyland. All the stores were decorated according to a particular theme. The one in Silicon Valley was laid out as if the entire store was one ginormous computer chip. I mean, they would literally have wire traces on the floor. You drive your cart down. They'd have like light diodes and cathodes and everything as large as a person, and all sorts of like arcing going overhead and crazy stuff like that. There are other ones that one was done up as Atlantis. I believe the one in Burbank was done up as Mars Attacks. So you had like aliens with death rays, statues that were shooting army guys with jeeps. There was a flying saucer that was crashed through the opening. The one in Vegas was done up as a casino. It was like a giant slot machine. They were fantastic, and inside was everything a geek could hope for, including most. I mean, it not only had like your giant TVs and your software and your bags of Fritos and things like that, but very importantly, it had giant component sections. So you could, you didn't just have one choice of hard drive. You had 40 choices of hard drive, or 50. You could get RAID arrays. You could get external storage enclosures. You could buy resistors. I mean, it's like it had electronic testing equipment like you can't believe, just aisles and aisles of it. And in its heyday, man, there was nothing like it. Unfortunately, the internet kind of killed it. I mean, the margin at stores like that mostly isn't driven by people who really need a Cat 6 cable in the middle of the night. It's driven by people who want to blow $5,000 on a sound system and a large screen TV. And when Costco and later on Amazon got into that game and sucked all the easy profit off things, you're left with these ginormous stores. They're very expensive to run, but they did not have the profit anymore to make them profitable. And they were just kind of twisting in the wind the last couple of years, and eventually they closed their doors, I believe, last year. And but yeah, while they were going, man, there's nothing on the planet like that. I mean, Best Buy does not come close to what Fry's was. They're whole other worlds as far as electronic geekery. But anyway, yeah, that's a thing. Micro Center here. Micro Center is actually kind of a nice little, almost a middle ground, but they don't go as heavy on the geek stuff, but they at least do, like if I needed an SSD like right this second, I could get one at Micro Center. Same thing goes for like RAM or things like that. Whereas I go to Best Buy, I'm like, maybe they got one, maybe they don't. Maybe I have to buy a computer and rip it out of the computer in order to get it. But so it goes. All right. Yeah, Nora says, yeah, comics. But Pete, most of us have thousands of comics to read when the sort of thing happens. Yeah, one of the things I did just to pass the time as I'm waiting for a raid to rebuild, is I was sitting there going, well, okay, how long does it look like this is going to take? And it looked like it would take 2 to 3 hours, which is the hardest thing ever, is to sit around while everything's down and you're driving yourself crazy, just picturing all the frustration and everything that's going on, not just for yourself and your staff, but all the customers, all you guys out there. And you're like, but there's not a dang thing I can do to make this faster. And if I restart or I do anything like that, I start the process over again. So I was like, okay, I got like 3 hours. I have nothing I can do, and I'm way too wired to sleep at that point. And I'm like, I'm gonna file. Yep. So all my comics are filed again. So that's a thing. Oh my goodness. I'm looking for. Wow, you guys have some good drinks going on. And looking for ComicBase TV. All right, so Greg says, so I'm pass along to the Atomic Avenue side of things. When browsing a specific user store in A, you only see the comic books in inventory, you don't see the books or magazine. Any chance of getting that fixed? Yes, we've been talking about them. That is planned for the next upgrade. That is one of the, you guys probably know that I got taken off task from ComicBase for a while. I got borrowed for Atomic Avenue for about a month, a few months back, and we knocked out the whole thing. It was frustration because ComicBase could let you manage books and magazines, but Atomic Avenue wasn't set up to incorporate those fully. So I was essentially consulting over there to make sure that happened. And there's a couple little fine points that we didn't fully flesh out. And that is some of the more esoteric browsing of the other areas. You can get to them if you go there directly, but some of the paths, like if I do like a writer search, the writer search is only going to be on Atomic Avenue, is only going to be for comic books. It doesn't, it's not going to find all the novels of Ray Bradbury right now. It'll only find the comics. But that's something that, once again, I've already committed to helping out and getting that resolved after we do our thing with the next big deal on ComicBase. So that's definitely on the plot. All right, let's see here. And Aaron says same issue. Oh, yes. Okay, so all right, good on that. All right, so let's talk about some other things. So a month or so ago, we'd had another bad Sunday night where I had decided, well, let's upgrade one of the drives in one of the servers with a 4 terabyte SSD. And after a bit of poking and prodding, did a restart, and suddenly the system didn't want to boot anymore. And again, very bad night. Result is the end of that one, but at least we were back up in the morning. But we learned a hard lesson about never ever ever change your BIOS settings ever if you're in a RAID. If you've got your boot disk in a certain RAID configuration, that is the way it's going to stay. Because if you change the BIOS setting later, you will overwrite that boot record and you'll be in a world of hurt. So don't do that. So it's anyway. That was one of the hard technical lessons from the time before. But anyway. But let's see, where was I going on this? Good Lord, I'm just having flashbacks from my own IT PTSD. Anyway, oh heck, I don't even know. I'm just going to move on. By the way, and I will say, you guys probably, if you're watching this podcast, you are probably the person that your parents call for help when their computer is acting up. I'm just going to put it out there. It's there's always somebody in every circle that is like the guy that gets the calls for help. For me and my family, as no one's gonna get surprised. I'm usually the guy who gets phoned whenever someone's computer isn't working. Matter of fact, I very much considered getting there's a T-shirt you can order that says "No, I will not fix your computer." And I think my mom's favorite Mother's Day card I ever gave her is "Mom, I'll always be your tech support." But anyway, but yeah, you guys might not be surprised at all to know that even guys like us, we do tech all frickin' day. 24/7, and we've been doing it for years. I mean, that is actually where my education is computers. Even us, there are times when I do not know what to do here, and so there needs to be people that even we can call for help. There actually are some services out there which for $150, $200 an hour that will give you that next clue you need to get over certain of these problems. It's quite a bit beyond your average Best Buy type thing, but honestly can be just as frustrating. They can only do so much for you, and if it turns out the problem is hardware, there's no substitute for just having the hardware laying around. So that is something that we've definitely added to our kit. As I'm speaking right now, in our supply closet, there are now multiple power. There are spare power supplies. There are spare fans. There's spare pretty much everything. Except for spare computers, and the spare computers are happening. But I'd also say, just as a matter of just general prep for yourselves, think, because you get a little philosophical when you have a lot of time on your hands to think about things like this. But yeah, it doesn't hurt to go around your life and just say, all right, look, if I took this away, right, what would be the things where if I took them away right now, it would really, really hose me? And see if there's something you can do to fix that. I mean, it's the reason that we carry a spare tire in the back of our cars, right? It's like, yeah, our cars are in perfectly good working, condition. The tires are good. They got, they're not wearing thin, where else, the roads are fine. We're not driving through a war zone. But if you had a blowout, especially in the middle of nowhere, you want to not just be waiting for the tow truck. You want to be able to get on your way. So, I mean, do the same thing. I mean, honestly, in the back of my car, I keep a med bag and I keep a go bag. Go bag is all the things where, like, if I was stuck in some horrible, horror movie. I used to drive across the Mojave a lot, from California out to Vegas, and just like, okay, if I had a horrific breakdown halfway through the desert, what would I need to be able to get, survive to, or at least if some guy was going to pick me up and he was a crazed trucker or something like that, what would be the things that I better have on me in order to, be able to get through that situation? Same thing goes with, like, I keep, an EMR bag in the back of my car just for things like, if some horrific thing happens, actually most of your really bad life altering injuries, unless they're just gross bodily trauma, things like that. The difference between having a couple simple things and knowing how to use them and not could really be the difference as to whether you live or die. And so, I mean, yeah, I have cat tourniquets, I have Israeli bandages, gauze, so forth. I mean, there are certain things where, like, yeah, okay, for most of the things that aren't going to kill you outright, or if I come across somewhere where someone has an accident, you can actually do a bit of good before the the EMTs get there. So, but yeah, no, just it's worth looking around and just say, okay, if I couldn't get to the store, winter's coming up soon. If you couldn't get to the store for a week, what would be the things that would really hose you down? And so, yeah, make sure you get some peanut butter. Make sure you get some water. Make sure you got some, spare can of gas. Whatever the thing is, we filled up our propane tanks today. Some of this is some of this thinking is very much, closing, the barn door after the horse leaves. Same time, you're like, that horse is going to wander off again. So next time out, just don't be an idiot in exactly the same way, and you'll do some progress in life. All right, moving on. All right, let's see here. All right, an actual comic-based question. Let's answer it. Oro asks, and let's actually get up our thing here. In TV, books, comic-based TV, in books or comics or mags for that matter, what's the difference between cover date, general, and street date? Other tab. What it is, and let me go ahead and show you that in the program, if I can get that up. Where? Sorry, I have my monitor set so that everything's really small right now. All right, let's switch over to this one here. I believe that's monitor number 4. Okay. So, looking over here. All right, so what he's talking about over here is, say, for Yogi Bear Comics, Marvel over here, we've got a cover date. This is the November 1977 issue. If you were to stare at the fine print on that cover, or, matter of fact, you can actually do this. You'll see that this is that's the November issue right there. And so forth. Lets you know when the thing was scheduled to come out. Now, street date is when it actually came out. Now, these things, traditionally in publishing, especially back when comics were returnable, could be off by months from each other. I mean, like several months. You would be in January and you'd be putting out March comic books. The reason publishers would do this one is because if they put out an issue of, they're used to selling papers, right? You're not going to buy yesterday's paper. Same thing goes where you're not going to buy last month's issue of Look magazine. Or so forth. But if you sit there and say, like, oh, well, this is the March issue of Superman, you're probably going to go ahead and buy that one. There's no problem in doing it. But on the other hand, when it actually hits the streets, sometimes that matters. There was a big correction that got processed today about Steve Ditko. I forget the name of the comic book. It was an early kind of off-brand, kind of a crummy comic book, actually. But Steve Ditko, he's been some good things. He's been some bad things. Sorry, I'm going to stop fooling around with that. I'm going to let's put myself down here, so I'm largely out of the way about there. And now I'm going to switch to go full screen because I don't need to show the screen just at the moment. Anyway, so the question came up with, we had some, it was like strange number something or other, but it was listed as Steve Ditko's first published work. Well, it turns out the cover date would have made it the first published work, but when you actually looked at the actual date it hit the street, the really first published date was actually a completely different book. And once you know that, it actually changes the valuation of things. Street dates are interesting these days for a lot of other things, like just knowing, if you were to say pull everything with a street date of this week, you would know this week's comic books. And so we have a separate field called street date. And let's go over here under, I believe it's other. Yeah, right over here. So we don't have a street date for Yogi Bear #1, but if you go to something more modern, it's not infrequent for that to be filled in with the actual date that this thing got delivered to your comic shop. Now, it defaults on modern comic books. Let's go to something somewhat modern. Let's go to, like, say, Vampirella. What are we on, the 8th series? 7th series now. All right. And hopefully I won't look like an idiot here. I'm just going to pick on a random one right now. Yeah. Never try double-clicking on things that you haven't first pre-flighted, but I'm going to do it anyway because I'm living dangerous life after this last weekend. Okay, great. All right, so the Diamond Order code was May 1909-98. The street date this thing hit in 2019 on 7/17 was when that was actually delivered. Now, Diamond will tell us when this thing was meant to hit the streets, and in most cases that's when it actually does hit the streets, when it gets delivered to your comic shop. Sometimes things get delayed. Sometimes they had to switch up an artist at the last minute, and the artist didn't turn his pages, whatever the thing is, and even though it was going to be 7/17, it really hit 3 weeks later. In which case, you go ahead and if you were of such an ilk and of such a mind to, go ahead and correct the street date in your copy. Right click on it, submit as a correction, and we will update our street dates accordingly. That's something that's just it's interesting from comic history. It's interesting sometimes if you're using it to manage store inventory and so forth. But that's the difference between those two fields. Street date is when it really hit. The cover date is nominally when the publisher said something was going to hit. All right. Let's see here. ComicBase TV says, let's see, Steve's saying, let me switch up so I can get to the key. A relative who managed to set foreground and background color to white. That's awesome. Don't do that on your computer. That would be bad. By the way, one of the things we were doing in other adventures of development this last week is we're playing around with different themes. By the way, everything you see in ComicBase, you can theme. So right now I'm using the green version of, I believe this is the Wave theme. You can go under the File menu over here, go to Theme. And let's spin up for a second, and I'll drag it over here. And you can say things like I gave myself a custom picture when I'm in books and when I'm in magazines. This is the default one for the comics. And I can choose. Do I like the blue one, the green one, the whatever else. This actually is a great thing to do when you're especially when you have multiple databases, just so that you can easily tell which one you're working in without having to look at the list up top here. The thing in the parentheses at the top. But I know, for instance, the main database that we work with is blue. My personal database is green. If I have one my Livestream database I use for the show, I think I colored that one orange, and so forth. So this is actually a good little trick you can use here to make these things similar. But anyway, these themes, you can design them your own, and we have some documentation somewhere on the website which tells you all the parameters you're allowed to control. You can control everything from the grid colors, the shading colors, the what colors you're using for the titles, some of the fonts, background images, so forth, even the sound effects you use. Those are all under control, and you can design your own. We are expanding on this greatly in the next version of ComicBase. So you'll see some very dramatic themes in the new one. But one thing I would definitely not suggest is do not ever, in ComicBase or anything else, do not set the foreground color, which is the color the type is on, and the background color, the color it's sitting on, to be the same color. Otherwise, you will go insane. All right, that was the longest riff on a small point I will ever say. All right, so let's see here. And Greg, Mr. Segway. So which would you say is worse in your opinion? What I went through this weekend or what Diamond went through with ransomware? Oh, dear lordy. There is no comparison. Diamond is in a bad way right now. I remember what I was meant to say. I meant to make the segue. I was going to do it, really. So I told you about a month ago, I did something with a new disk drive that hosed up the server overnight, and I only fixed it after a sleepless night and got it going early in the morning before business opened up. So not that many people knew it was even down. But the whole time I'm sitting there just sweating blood and chugging coffee. So I mean, this is stressful if you're on the inside of these things. And when I finally got to sleep that, morning, afternoon, whatever it was, after I knew everything was back to normal and so forth, and I could actually, get some sleep for the first time in, a day and a half, I crashed out and I was woken up, and my wife told me, it's like, oh yeah, by the way, Facebook's down. And suddenly, I gotta tell you, I mean, this makes me a bad person or something, but I just felt a lot better, because I felt like an absolute failure that my system, which I'm in charge of, I'd let it be down for, 13 hours or something. And it turns out that one of the largest companies with the most experienced staff, the most highly trained, people on, probably, I mean, the top talent on the dang planet, they'd had something that, I mean, if me, my one guy, feeling really badly on a Sunday night, if that was one thing, just imagine how Facebook felt that night, where their system was so hosed up they couldn't use their card access keys to get into the door to fix it, until someone jimmied the door or found a workaround for that one. But no, I mean, that I gotta tell you, it just took all the pressure off me. I figured I'd be, when I eventually got up, I'd be answering calls all day long about, like, hey, why is the system down? You're the worst IT guy ever, which, I might be. But no, instead, all the national and international news that day was about Facebook. Unfortunately, and in all seriousness, we have something shaping up a little bit like that right now. So you guys all know Diamond Comics. The biggest distributor of comic books, and frankly, up until Marvel and DC flaked off away from them earlier, just over the last several months, they were the way that comics got distributed in North America. As is right now, they're a smaller distributor, but still an incredibly important one. And they also were down on Friday, and I was surprised after I got my system back up. It's like to hear that, wait, they're still down? God, but those guys have a real staff. I mean, I went and toured Diamond's offices, and they had, they had like a mini computer and like, maybe 20 IT guys sitting around, doing stuff with like big iron kinds of stuff. I mean, they were running like a really serious IT operation back when we were running ComicBase, back in the 90s. I think I showed, I think I showed Steve Jeppy ComicBase on like a PowerBook 140 or something. I mean, it was like the level of tech that we were both bringing to the party was nowhere near. And the idea that they could get taken out and still be down days later was just unthinkable to me. And they're still down. As it turns out, Diamond is down for a terrible reason. They're being held up for ransomware. Ransomware is something we talked about in the program a while ago, where there was the R-Evil attack, amongst others. It's hit gas pipelines, it hits hospitals, it's hit frickin' everybody at this point. And apparently it hit Diamond. Someone managed to install malware on their machine that typically the way it goes is you find a source of vulnerability. Oftentimes it's something very banal, like getting an employee to click on something that they shouldn't be clicking on. They say, oh, do you want to install the security tracer, or this, or there's an important system update, make sure you install it, or whatever the thing is. But you trick somebody with enough system permissions, typically, into installing the thing that lets it get in. Once it's in, some of the more involved ones do very elaborate things to take you out. They will run scripts that will delete your backups. They'll run scripts which reach out and spread themselves to different places, make themselves hard to find, and then they start going out and encrypting all your data. And typically what you'll do after they've encrypted all your client critical data is they will then present you with, in R-Evil's case, an incredibly user-friendly dialogue which says, you've been hacked. There's a little timer going, and by the way, the price for us unhacking you is the low price of, I don't know, $40,000, $400,000, whatever the thing is. It's they kind of target towards your own financials. They figure, what do you think you can afford? And then they say, by the way, you got 12 hours to pay, and if not, the price doubles. At which point, you lose your damn mind. Because you're sitting there going and you go and check, and you find out the threat is indeed real. They really have encrypted all your data with a key you don't know. That if you were to try to decrypt it, would take infinite amounts of time. If they've been successful and, you know, they've taken out a lot of your other systems. I mean, my question on all these guys is always, where the hell are your backups, man? And sometimes if it's something really obvious, like you stored the backup on the same drive as your main stuff, yeah, I get why a PowerShell script that took out your backup could do you in. But even then, there's usually, I mean, even we have loads and loads and layers of backups for our mission critical stuff, and store it in many places which aren't on a single computer. They aren't even on a single network. So it's, you know, we've been down, we've lost production time, but there's never been a question, even for a tiny company like ours, of losing actual, you know, real, you know, user data that we care about. I will admit I was a little sloppy when I finally got the forums back up, and, you know, and those, I gotta admit, we did not consider mission critical. And when it was pointed out to me, oh yeah, there's some forum posts that, well, were not restored, I kind of thought, yeah, we'll get by without those. I'm so sorry if you'd written something of deathless intent. My apologies, but I gotta tell you, I was too tired to care at that point. But anyway, but no, for Diamond, for these hospitals, for all these other guys, I'm just sitting there going like, guys, where's your backups? Because why shouldn't you be able to, you know, initialize new hardware, you know, make sure it is, you know, clean, virus-free, scrubbed, load in your old databases, pick up again, and be on your way inside of a day or two. I don't know. I'd have to know the insides of the attack to know why that isn't a thing, because it'd be the first thing I'd be thinking. You know, again, it's, why can't you just do that? I mean, I get why you could be slow. I get why it would definitely cause you downtime. You know, if you're going to hose up a subway, if you're going to disrupt a gas pipeline, whatever the thing is, and you're going to scramble hospital admitting records, I can get why for a day or two or three that you would be hosed up, but I don't get why you'd lose it all. And of course, what they're hoping to do is they're hoping to get you to pay X amount of Bitcoin or X amount of some kind of cryptocurrency that they can spirit away into various places. Which then you pay that, and then they say, and we'll give you the key to decrypt your data, and then we'll go away. That's the promise, of course. And I guess about half the people pay. You know, by and large. So anyway, back to our old friends at Diamond. I mean, this is a grim phenomena. So this is from Comic Book Resources. Diamond Distributors, the oldest distributor of comic books in the world, is now who have the exclusive deals with Dark Horse, Boom, and Image Comics. Been hit with a ransomware attack that has been, the company's website shut down for some retailers, affected the company's ability to handle all of its comic book deliveries. With final order cutoff order adjustments due yesterday, the website outage possibly affected some retailers' ability to order product from the companies that are exclusive to Diamond. Diamond put out, they apparently had to set up their own, you know, short-term website just to communicate with retailers. We actually, when we were down the whole thing, we basically just posted to Facebook, just things saying, yeah, we're struggling with our servers. So I mean, I get where Diamond's coming from, you know, setting up these sort of short-term sites. As many of you may know, we are currently experiencing system issues affecting our order processes and communications. Our IT department and a team of third-party experts are working on the clock to address the issues and restore full operations. Determined that the system issues we've experienced are the result of a ransomware attack. These attacks have unfortunately become increasingly pervasive in recent months, impacting organizations around the world. I want to assure that our customer data and financial information is not stored on our network, and as such we have no reason to believe it's been impacted by the attack. Additionally, the investigation underway by our team of third-party forensic experts. We've also notified law enforcement. I gather that Diamond has turned to a company called Agility Solutions, something like that. But they're apparently a third party. You know, again, they're like the guys that tech people call when they're in trouble, and they specialize in this sort of attack and getting companies back on their way. Diamond continues. While some of the systems remain down, rest assured we're continuing to ship product and fill orders to the great extent we can. Our retail service portal is online, available for FOC this evening and tomorrow. I can confirm that is true. Thank you for patience. We work to, you know, restore, etc., etc. And I think that's all I had of substance. There's a couple of interesting things about Diamond's reaction on this one. There's one tiny thing I'll take issue with, and a lot of things I got nothing but sympathy for. Like I say, in this world we live in, where ludicrously the President of the United States says, wow, gas pipelines have been disrupted by Russia-based cyber attacks. So in my meeting, I will give you a list of, I believe it was 16 things I really wish your guys wouldn't target. which, by the way, I noticed that comic software distributors were no doubt not on that list. But no, I mean, if you're in the business of breaking people's stuff and taking and holding them up for money, I mean, so let's say this is a mob kind of thing. Until there is a penalty in real life for doing it, you will keep doing it. So yes, I do expect these kind of attacks to keep going and to get very, very nasty. You guys have probably gotten the stupid version of this one. We've all gotten the messages like, "Oh no, I saw what you were doing on your computer because I've hacked your webcam, and unless you or I know your password from that site that got hacked like 5 years ago, and then and unless you give me Bitcoin, I will do something or other." All those are crap. The password they give you from 10 years ago from the hacked website, that one's actually real. But please don't use the same password on all your sites. If you're not doing so already, use a password manager so you have a different password on every site you've done. Because, at some point, someone is going to get, a lot of times it's just something stupid like the company went out of business and sold their drives. And someone went out there and said, "Oh, look, a database full of passwords." Because they're an old school company that never encrypted passwords or hashed the passwords, so they stored them in plain text. And so if you're the kind of guy who uses the same password on your utility bill and on that fan site for Battlestar Galactica you went to and whatever else, stop doing that, because one of those passwords is going to get sold off to someone or somebody's going to hack their site, and then they'll have access effectively. If they know that in your email, they mostly know your access to everything that password ever unlocked. Anyway, but by and large, these things they're BS threats. They're not real. But realistically, there's a lot of money in the game at this point of taking really very competent hackers, whether they're based in Russia, China, Serbia, wherever, U.S., could be anywhere. If you can make money shaking down people by, tricking some poor, slob at your company and installing malware, and then, letting stuff in and then holding people up for ransom, if that can happen, it's gonna happen until we find a way to make it so it's dangerous to do that. The way that you stop shakedown operations with the mob is you make it dangerous to hold shakedown operations. You make it so that the mob is scared of the cops. Another way to do it, interestingly enough, if you guys ever remember The Sopranos, a couple of Tony's boys were walking around the neighborhood, and they tried shaking down, they're used to shaking down these mom and pop stores around the neighborhood and say, "Hey, nice store you got here. Shame if anything would have happened for it. But as the head of the neighborhood protection committee, of course I can help you out for, a small, contribution of $500 a week, whatever the thing is, right?" Where it's just understood that, unless $500 disappears from the till every week, your front window gets smashed in. They made the mistake that one day they walk around to a business, clearly Starbucks. They don't say it's Starbucks, but it's clearly Starbucks. And they do the, "Hey, nice modern coffee shop you have here. It'd be a shame if something were to happen to it." And the guy was like, "Yeah, look, man, we got $20 that we can give to community events per month. That's it. Every cup that's in this place is counted. I give you money, I'll get fired, but that'll be the end of it. There's nothing I can do for you here. You throw a brick through the window, corporate will replace it. It's out of my hands." And Tony's guys just walked out there, shook their heads, and they're like, "Man, the world is changing." No, there's only two ways to beat this one. One is for technologies to develop in such a way that they become hacker-proof. If somebody finds some kind of silver bullet that makes it so that no one's ever going to click that bad link, no one's ever going to be able to, install the malware, no one's going to be able to open up that back door, whatever that thing is. And God knows, companies try. If you guys work on a corporate network, your corporate IT guy has so many layers of things that you can't do as a user on that computer that you could do on your home computer. And they're just things like for instance, I've gotten a number of tech support calls from people who just want to run ComicBase. They're like, "Yeah, no, you're connecting to a server that's not on our approved list of 20 servers, so the connection just can't be made." Or you're trying to install, software that isn't one of our 5 approved software packages. And so on a corporate level, they just block the installation. If you're on a corporate network like that and it's locked down that tight, we cannot help you. I mean, well, I mean, good news, you can't get, your corporation can't get in trouble. But it also, I mean, they do have the power to lock down machines so hard that conventional software can't get through. And that will, as well, block a lot of the installation of malware. You can install software yourself. I mean, you can install any number. A lot of people will install, they kind of go too far the other way. They'll install like 3 or 4 different antivirus security packages, each one claiming to be more hardcore than the next one. Mostly what these guys wind up doing is they wind up tripping all over themselves, slowing your machine to a halt, and they still are going to do you in if you're the kind of guy who clicks on software that says, oh yeah, well, yeah, there's a problem with your driver. Double click here, and when you get the administrator prompt, just go ahead and say yeah, and if it tells you to turn off the antivirus, just go ahead and say yeah. I mean, they can trick you into doing all the things as a user of a regular computer that's not on a corporate network that will circumvent these things all the time. You just got to develop your own, gut instincts to say, no, if I don't know this guy and he sent me a link, don't click it. But unless someone figures out something brilliant, man, if you find a way to make computers so that sort of thing can't be done to them anymore, then maybe we stop this sort of thing from happening again. Until that day, I think the only thing that will really help is if the people who do this sort of thing suffer. And by that, I mean, by whatever means, they get tracked to their source and really, really bad and memorable things happen to them. I'm not talking about that they get dragged through a long court process that ends inconclusively 10 years later where they get $1 million fine having done billions of dollars of damage. I mean, something that would make a criminal think twice about their line of work. But unless you guys got some suggestions for that, I don't know how to help you. And I think these kind of ransomware attacks are going to get worse until somebody figures something like that out. All right, so let's see here. And I'm sorry, and Steve Desner pointed out the specific question of cover street dates appears to book types where they appear to be the same thing. That's interesting because I think that is actually an excellent point. So books kind of shouldn't have they shouldn't have cover dates. If I understand the question right. So let me go to a book. And let's take a particular one over here. And yeah, no, books do have cover dates. I'm wrong on that one. Yeah, I'm wondering. This is one. I think you guys have now stumped the owner on this one. I think the answer on this one is that we had originally thought that we're not going to have cover dates, and we must have put it back in there for some kind of compatibility reason. But realistically, cover date ought to be release date, is what that ought to be. And so, yeah, that's a good one, man. We got to look into that one, and I'm gonna, if I got an answer for you, I will make it happen by the next version. Thank you for opening that, and thank you, Steve, for clarifying that one up for me. So thank you. But yeah, that's a weird one, man. It's, as you get these different types of media, there are a couple weird edge cases on that one, and that's when I think it kind of fell through. All right, so we talked about that one, and Ed's joining us here, and he says, so we covered the diamond thing. He said, any thoughts on the Eternals, and what did I think? I have not watched the Eternals, so not 100% kosher for me to comment on it. I gotta say, the reviews I've heard from people that I respect were grim. The consensus is the CG scenes look pretty cool, but that as a story goes, it's overly long and kind of uninvolving. I was a fan of the old Jack Kirby series, and this one is drawn more from the Neil Gaiman take on the Sandman, but realistically they gave an art house director control over what should have been a big, bold, muscular sci-fi property, and it sounds like it just got a little bit twee and obscure. But that's what I hear. I can't say from personal experience, so go out and take your chances. Now, I have heard, on the other hand, that Dune is freaking amazing, and if you can catch it in IMAX, do it. And I've heard just as as fervently from people who've seen that one that Dune settled in for a long ride, and it does not conclude because if you guys have seen how many books were that thing was based on, don't expect it to conclude. But for the time you are spent to it, apparently it is just mind blowing. So yeah, check it out. Let's see here. Folks, don't forget. Okay, I think we are good on that one. Holy cow, the time went. All right, that's what happens when I rant. All right, so Gray wants to remind everyone, don't forget we have a dedicated thread on the ComicBase message boards. We can request live stream topics and demos. And let's see, provide the thread doesn't go backwards by a week or two. Sorry, guys, that's the one side. Oro asks, can hackers hide the malware anywhere on a company network computers? Do companies have to replace all the network due to start clean? Not often. And in my experience, most of the time when your computer is going haywire and you're like, oh my god, I'll bet you I got a virus. Unless you're the kind of guy who's always getting viruses, which is, in other words, unless you're the kind of guy who's always clicking the weird link that your friend sends you, it's almost never a virus. I mean, you can run all the virus checker guys you want, and it will usually wind up being something else, in my experience. At least that's where I go. I have been on people's machines where, oh yeah, you got like a whole zoo of viruses on here, but that's not most folks. On a corporate level, it's what happens is there's for like especially Windows-based corporate networks, is IT can set these things called group policies where they you can go out, normally, like if I buy a computer at Best Buy, I am the master of that computer. There's nothing that I, the administrator, can't do while running that computer. A lot of times they will actually have you running in a less powerful mode when you're inside of a program, so that you're not always running in God mode the whole time, because God mode is where, again, you can install things you didn't mean to install. So Microsoft actually does this thing, they call it impersonation, but basically when you're out and about in Windows Explorer, you're in administrator mode. You can move files around, you can delete programs, you can do all the things that anyone who owns that computer can do. But as soon as you launch a program, you're running just as the user of that program, and it's a much less powerful thing. So from within that program's scope, you can't do all these really controversial system-changing things. But anyway, imagine that whole same concept brought out to the idea that, yeah, if I'm the owner of my company's network, I'm the god. Anyone who joins my network, you could take your computer, you're the administrator of that computer, but they don't get, by virtue of joining my network, they get their power stripped down, and suddenly there's a whole new set of rules are in effect on their computer that they can't control. I mean, again, and you can, if you guys ever go, if you're really bored one day, check out a thing, it's called the Group Policy Editor in Windows, especially if you're on a corporate network, or if you have the ability to get into that mode. And it's just ridiculously fine-grained what you can enforce on a group policy amongst a corporate network, and you can enforce it from different segments of your network. You can say, look, I control the master corporate network, and the guys in Belgium aren't allowed to do this, but the guys over in the headquarters over in Canada can. There's a number of things you can do as far as setting up levels and permissions and so forth, and they can be incredibly specific. So typically, a user on a corporate network, it's much harder for them to, a well-managed corporate network, it's much harder for them to install something that's going to affect a lot of things. And it would have to be a pretty, I'm going to say, like, not a great system administrator who allows a user to install something that takes out the network as a whole. Now, you could leave it wide open. That's an option too, but you rarely see on large companies, you rarely see something like that happen. What's much more typical is a user on a smaller, on a corporate network will install, well, one of two things will happen. A user on a smaller computer will install something that opens up certain access to that would not normally be there. Just so that normally the computer would not be able to, say, talk directly to a server in Serbia or something, but yet that connection gets made by other means. That's a way that goes. Another way that's even more common, though, is you trick somebody who does have that God access in the corporate data center into installing something that's really bad, and that's how, like, the pipeline got brought down the other day, is something that came in as an update to the security software for the network itself. So it got installed by the system administrator. The guy with the God access installed something that came from a company he absolutely trusted. And it's installing at a very low level. It's meant to manage all these network connections at this very low level. and the hackers had managed to implant a malware into the system update of that. And once they tricked the system administrator into installing it, that's when the bad stuff happened. But yeah, typically on a corporate network, it's really hard for you to do big damage. It's pretty easy for you to take out your own machine, maybe your workgroups stuff, but on any of the corporate networks I've ever worked on, really hard for you to do something that would take out the network as a whole. I can't imagine how I'd do that on again, any network I've been on, but your mileage may vary. All right, other questions. Yeah, ComicBase TV drone strikes. It's funny because when you're talking about protection against different things. No, one of the scenarios we actually do worry about is what happens if we used to have like all our computers were in a rack in our offices in downtown San Jose, and was like, okay, what happens when somebody rolls a grenade in here? I mean, not that you're going to roll a grenade in there, but just as what if the water main bursts, it fries every computer in the stack. We used to, later on, we shared in a very, very secured facility in downtown San Jose. We had the server rack that was right next to MoveOn.org, which they had the goofiest looking stack you've ever seen. There was like about 7 or 8 different, blade servers. They were stuck on top of each other, but because they ran out of rack space, they just sort of had them wedged on top, and they were always just sort of perched in the rack. And if you'd shoved them one way or another too much, they would have like toppled over. It was the nuttiest thing. But they were literally the cage next to us at I forget the name of the facility down in downtown San Jose. But yeah, you have to think like, what if they just destroyed every one of your servers? You still have to be able to come back, from that. And so the way that most serious companies handle that is you deal with things like it's called log shipping for your database. One point I guess I'd meant to make earlier is, yes, we have backups. Our backups, again, you always wish you had one more than you have. But one thing we're very, very good at is we're very, very good at backing up our databases, because the databases for any company, it's where all the lifeblood of your thing is. I can buy new hardware, I can buy new installations of Windows, I can buy new web server software, I can eventually load up software and get the stuff going again. I can copy it over from my development system and have new copies of the website. But if the customer database was gone, I'm starting from scratch. It's like having a new business. So we have so many copies of that database in so many different forms, in so many different ways, that they really are immune from. And first of all, then they're also, we keep snapshots every 15 minutes. So when our server was going up and down on Friday, we were able to restore to within a couple minutes of when the last time something went down. So we might have lost a couple transactions if we don't think we lost anything at all. But yeah, you not only have that backup, but then you make sure that backup gets shipped, sent over to other things that aren't on that machine. They're not necessarily even on that network. So that if something physically awful happens, so if the drone strike levels human computing over here, someone who crawls to the wreckage will be able to say, all right, let's get some new servers, let's set them up again, let's load up the database, and you'd be back in business. In a way, you think about Parler. Amazon was their server rack, right? I mean, they were essentially renting out all their space. They were buying it off of Amazon Web Services, which is, for a great many years, we were buying our servers from Amazon Web Services when we stopped having our own racks, and then we went to their racks, and we eventually came back to our own racks again because we wanted to be able to have faster computing. Amazon, one day under political pressure, decided, yeah, we're going to decide we're not going to host you anymore, and we're going to give you basically no notice. You got to be gone. And so they had to come out of almost nowhere, get their database, which I'm sure was backed up someplace otherwise, find a whole bunch of new bandwidth, a whole bunch of new computers, get those all set up and provisioned. But really I think they were back up within a week, having located a new host and so forth. But they launched something that's, it's like a mini Twitter. But as long as you kept your database, you're okay. If you lose your database, give it up, become a creative artist or something. I don't know. All right, so let's see here. Compliment says, one of the people I helped got hit by a virus so hard he even uninstalled Norton and then disabled internet access. Yeah, I'm not super surprised. I mean, what would have happened probably, because The antivirus stuff installs in what's called the driver level. It's at the level below where applications install. So if you think about the core of Windows. So Windows starts out with a bootloader. It's the stuff. It's almost, you start out with stuff that actually is baked into your BIOS. Baked into chips almost. It's programmed onto your chips. But it starts out with very, very hardware central, and then it goes to special sectors on your disks themselves, which are not used for anything else, which tells it how to be a disk and how to boot up. And then you eventually get into the part where you're loading the basic parts of Windows. Once you get the basic parts of Windows up, then the next level up is the drivers. Those are the things that tell your keyboard how to be a keyboard, tells your disk drive how to be tells your CD-ROM how to be a CD-ROM, and so forth. Things like Norton install at the driver level, so they have very, very low level access to your computer. I mean, they could, if they wanted to, if you said things like wipe the hard drive, they would wipe the hard drive. I mean, they have that level of access. Things that live up on the application level, like ComicBase or regular Microsoft Word, whatever the thing is, we cannot do the things to your Windows that drivers can do. We can't control your monitor directly. We can't control your hardware directly, but drivers can. Anyway, when you have a virus, some of the more involved viruses, they probably can't turn off other drivers directly, but what they probably could do is cause them to crash and possibly have a hard time restarting. If you took a driver that was loaded into memory and you moved some of its files around, and then you somehow said, okay, now we need you to restart, and then it might do a thing where, like, once you've restarted, it shifted around enough of Norton's files so that Norton was unable to load again. That would be one way I could see doing it. Another way, most of the time, the real vulnerability in all these things is really the humans involved, is you trick the user into turning it off. One of the things I would hate it for years and years, it's still true, but we stopped giving the instruction out because it just sounds so sketch, is we tell people, when you're installing ComicBase or frankly any other program you've got, temporarily tell your security software to take 5, because you're installing stuff right now. You mean to be installing stuff, and you don't want a hyperactive, wow, cool, Amber Alert. Okay. Apparently someone's having a bad day. Anyway, I don't know. But anyway, but when you're installing any software, the standard advice is, turn off your antivirus software just for a couple minutes to let the install happen, because you're installing. If your antivirus software is too twitchy, it will get in the way where it'll actually block files that you're trying to install that you mean to install. So for instance, one file that we rely on is a file that allows Windows to talk to servers. And so there's a certain library that does that. And so we look and say, is that library installed on your machine? If it's not, we have to install it, because otherwise we can't talk to our servers. Well, if your antivirus software is running, and if your antivirus software is really twitchy, and somebody in the history of the world has ever once used a library like that to talk to a bad guy's server, then it might say, hey, this could be a virus. I'm going to block the install. And so then you'll call us up and you'll say, well, hey, I installed your software, but it doesn't talk to the ComicBase servers and I can't get updates. And then we'll say, yeah, sorry, guys, you should have turned off your antivirus. Now, we don't have these problems as much these days because a lot of the common components, the antivirus makers have gotten better about not blocking really common things, and they've gotten more AI based to figure out which things are real threats and which ones they're just hitting with too broad a brush. So we don't have that problem as much as we did 10 years ago. So we no longer actually give that advice, because one of the problems with that advice is it makes us sound like a bad guy right there. Yeah, it's like, yeah, I'm sure these ComicBase guys are fine. They're telling me to turn off my antivirus software before I install their program. What could go wrong? Unfortunately, that is the reality for any program you're going to install. Is be prepared to turn off your antivirus software, especially if you have a really twitchy antivirus software. But having said that, if you're installing something you don't know you're installing, and they're telling you things like, I need you to permanently disable McAfee or something, or you notice that McAfee or antivirus or your Norton isn't running after you've installed their program, at that point you should smell a rat. Because anything that any of these, like, temporarily disabled, it ought to be under your control and it ought to pop right back on after you restart. And if it doesn't, then someone pulled a dirty on you. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's always the human that's like the biggest source of vulnerability in all these things. All right, I think almost there. Comment says, I heard a story from the mainframe days in the 70s. Found a machine named Undead, and when a system man would go to erase it, it would wipe the mainframe. Jeez Louise. And Oro says, any recommendations for password manager? I'm nervous about it. So my personal take on password managers is the things that make me happy are things where they're not stored in anyone's cloud. In other words, I don't want to get one that requires me to have an internet connection to somebody else's server to get to my passwords, because I don't trust anyone else with my passwords. I want this thing to live on my machine. Now, if you're going to take an encrypted file and sync it over Dropbox to another machine, that's just fine, as long as nobody who isn't me could ever have read that file, because if it's encrypted, it's gobbledygook. But if I'm basing my password manager on your machine, then I'm trusting you to have encrypted it. I don't know for sure that thing is encrypted, and honestly, unless I do that, there's no way I'm typing my upper security passwords into it. We use a thing called 1Password. One of the things that it's one of the most reassuring things I've ever heard a password company say to me. Other than, yes, it lives only on your machine, you can sync it using Dropbox so it syncs with all your machines. But they're like, yeah, there's the administrator password, make sure it's a good one, and make sure you remember it, because if you lose it, we cannot help you. There is absolutely nothing we can do. And I'm like, yes, you're the guys for me. I want something where ideally I pay you once. I don't need to keep on paying you. Because I don't want my access to my own passwords to ever be under someone else's control on any level. And I also want so that no one who's not me could ever read them. So that's what we use. I hear good things about LastPass. There are others, but yeah, those are the main qualifications I would look for in a password manager. The cryptography that drives these things is actually pretty solid. Just make sure the business model of whoever you're using is equally solid. Just in terms of, you want the ultimate owner of all this stuff always to be you. Just like at ComicBase, we want the owner of your data to be you. I mean, let's say the bomb does go off and blitz out our servers. We want you to still be able to do everything with your database, your data shouldn't go away, right? Of course, if you blew up, the server that runs ComicBase.com, you're not going to be able to talk to ComicBase.com to get updates, because we're out of business now, right? But your data will still be there because it lives on your machine. That's something that we always loved about the way we're doing it. These days, we will make copies. When you ask us to, we'll make copies on our server, in order to drive things like the mobile app and things like that. But you're always the guy who drives it, and if you someday say like, nah, I don't wanna, or whatever else, or you wanna not buy our next version of ComicBase, whatever the thing is, your data never goes away. It's your data. It's not our data. I would look for the same thing on a password manager. Just make sure that your passwords, are yours and yours alone. And yeah, it's these days the password requirements for every site are so convoluted. It's like, yeah, I need 2 characters never been used anything else. You can't use any password you've ever used before. You can't do blah, blah, blah. I gotta tell you, I only personally know about 4 of my passwords. I mean, if you could stick cattle prods up to me, and I couldn't tell you anything more than those 4, because I don't know. They are rando strings of foo that are one-offs for every site. Every time I go to a new site, 1Password pops up and says, okay, just create a new account. Do you need a new password? Yeah, here, go. And it makes whatever the requirements of that site are, it makes a password that way. It stores it in its database for the whole thing. It's all encrypted, and the only password I have to remember really is the one that that decrypts the whole database to feed me the passwords. And it's funny because I fear for my memory is that when I use like my iPhone or things like that, I just use my thumbprint. Because you can turn on biometric security on some of the stuff, and you don't even need to remember the master password. So that's a thing. So yeah, that's where I would go. All right, I think that's about it from me. Guys, we ran a little long, but hope it was a good one. Hope it was useful for you guys. Anyway, so next time, no doom and gloom. No, this was honestly this. You know, there was never a time I was super worried. You know, with all the goings on this weekend, there were definitely times I was pulling my hair out just out of frustration because you're trying to figure what is the bizarre. You're trying to be a detective. You're just trying to solve the puzzle. Why is this thing that was always perfectly stable no longer perfectly stable? And yeah, in the end it wound up being a combination of hardware that was failing, and it was causing as a result system problems, and then our own efforts to restore it caused some additional system problems for us. But we were able to work it out. In the end, it winds up being follow the clues and unwrap it. But anyway, yeah, it's never. I mean, I knew we were always going to get back up in business and everything. I mean, in a way, I'm glad it happened over a weekend because I never had to idle the people. But next time out, let's not be all doom and gloomy. Let's move on to other things, and hopefully it'll be another 13 years before anything similar ever happens, if ever. In the meantime, honestly, prayers, thoughts, everyone to the Diamond guys. I hope they get back on their feet. And I hope they don't pay the sons of bitches who, are hosing them down. Steve Jeppy over there runs a good operation. He has very serious people in his IT department. At least when I knew them, they were darn serious when I knew them. And I doubt he's slacked up any. But yeah, there's a bunch of bad guys, and I want the bad guys to pay, and I don't want the good guys to pay the bad guys. So that's about it from me. We'll see you guys next week, and next week we're going to talk about some newness that's coming down that is going to be awesome because we're getting really close to ignition time, if you guys know what I'm talking about. Talk to you later. Bye-bye.